Okay. I'll pass it down. Thank you. Doc. Hello.
You gave me one just to.
It's 11 o'clock. I will call the Board of Commissioners Finance and Administration Committee meeting to order. Have approval of the agenda. Is there anything that you wish to have added, deleted?
Nothing for me, sir.
And as chair, I'll call the agenda firm. Move on to call to the public. Any hands up online?
There is not at this time, Mr. Chairman. We do have lots of people joining us.
You're a popular guy. Boy, that's unusual. I wonder what's up. Okay, we'll move to our first item of business then, and that's consider entering into a 5-year renewal of the lease agreement with ACAP and authorize the board chairperson to sign the same. So is this property located behind the old Commission on Aging?
It is, yeah, behind the
I didn't-
current Oasis school.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
and it's just the property. ACAP they own the modular that is on the property. It's just the property that we rent to them.
Okay, so do we still own the old Commission on Aging, even though is it being leased by the school? So they own that portion of it?
Who I believe they own that
Okay.
outright. Yes, and we do have a couple of representatives from ACAP on the Zoom with us
Okay.
this morning. I'm happy
Well-
to say.
I learned something new.
Excellent, excellent. Well, office space has become a hot commodity for us recently, so we're certainly researching all the available places.
Yep. And ACAP does provide a lot of really important services to our community, so we appreciate that.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to weigh in on the renewal of the lease?
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Janelle Bolus, and I am the Head Start and Early Head Start Director with ACAP. Our current lease that we've had for quite some time. We've been in this location. We've figured 20 years or so. That's how long we've had a license to run there. At that location, we have a portable building, and we run a Early Head Start center for 8 children ages birth to 3 years old. So our current agreement expires the end of this month. So we are hoping to continue that relationship, to continue to provide those services that are so important to people in the community.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have questions, comments on the renewal of the lease? I see we're keeping the terms the same as in the
Terms
past.
the same, the request is for a 5-year renewal. And the rent is negotiable, although I did have a conversation with Janelle and Lori this morning. Thank you for your time, ladies. And I did learn that their budget is calendar year, and they've already submitted for their budget for 2024. They don't get state funding, it's all federal, right?
Mhm.
And so an increase in rent, I would definitely not recommend that because their budget's already been set for next year. Going forward, I asked them if rent were increased, where would they find the money to pay more rent essentially? And they wouldn't get any more funding if the rent went up, right? They would have to cut services. They'd have to find that within their own budget. So the rent is $200 a month, $2,400 a year. And I wouldn't recommend changing that. Even if we were to double it, that doesn't really make a very big impact in our general fund, right?
Yeah.
When you consider the value of the programming at those ages, that programming, that need, that's happening right here in our county. I think the staff report said something about you couldn't find a higher and better use for the property. So my recommendation would be to go forward with the same terms.
Agreed. The value
Mhm.
more than outweighs anything we could do with rent. And it's worth every penny. especially for the
Commissioner
kids
Embry,
with
would you
several-
like to make that motion then?
Sure. I move to consider a 5-year renewal rental of the lease agreement between 8 Cap and authorize the board chairperson to sign the same to our work session
Next Tuesday.
next Tuesday.
I will second that. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. It moves forward. Thank you,
so
ladies.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good work.
Thank you.
Second item, consider entering into the Second Amendment to the Medical Examiner Services Agreement with Edward W. Sparrow for medical examiner services for the period of January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024, and authorize the board chairperson to sign the same. So I read through this. It looks like it's been kind of contractual, but the Sparrow's trying to bring it in-house.
Yes, and that's something they certainly have the right to do. They're suggesting that maybe they need a little bit of time to focus on taking those services in-house and instead of contracting for them themselves. And so instead of renegotiating a new contract, basically they're saying, hey, right now we want to focus on that. Can we go forward with the current contract terms, a 1 year at a 6% increase? Current contract terms kept it at 4% through the years. They're suggesting a 6% 1 year.
You know, we've had the contract with him for a number of years. I don't know if we have other options out there to look at in the future or.
We do. I know right after January of last year, I reached out to a couple of their surrounding counties to see what they do for medical examiner service, because it's such a, you know, that's an attention getter in the budget, right? That's a large sum. So what I found talking to other counties is they said based on population of your county, you're pretty much right sized. I thought we were paying a lot, but really when I look at other counties, we're sort of in line with them, what they do. I know there is a consortium of counties that go with the medical examiner service. They kind of, it's what do I want to say? It's not like a pool, but they all contract with the same company for services. I don't think they treat it like a pool though. And we've looked into that before, comparable price wise. I know the services we get from Sparrow are really top notch. I know the medical investigators. I believe Sheriff might be listening if he wants to chime in. That would be fantastic. But I know any issues we've had in the past, issues that have come to me have all been over that they needed to wait too long in the field, or investigators were being held up in the field, and that was more to do with transport, right? And now we've solved that because we have the Sage transport services in addition to MMR that are more for those non-emergency transport. So that was really the only issue I knew of at the time, and that's been resolved.
Okay.
So Nicole, commissioners, I can weigh in on that if you'd like me to real quick.
Yeah.
Nicole is correct. You know, that was a struggle with us, just because of the ambulance service and stuff had, you know, was overwhelmed with what's going on, and they had personnel issues and still do, like everybody does. So this was a good workaround. It has worked well. We've had very little issues with it. The folks have been good. They've responded quickly, you know, and we've had no issues. So it's actually worked pretty good for MMR and the county and the MEIs. And it keeps, during these times, it keeps the fact that we're not on scene for a long period of time with someone's deceased loved one waiting for a transport. So all good things there.
Correct. Any other questions or comments?
Mhm.
Then I will move consideration of entering into the Second Amendment to the Medical Examiner Services Agreement with Edward Sparrow for medical examiner services for the period of January 1, 2024 through December 31st, 2024 to the work session next week. Support. It's been moved and supported. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It does move forward. Our next item, consider approving the prime contract change order number 12 with Clark Construction in the net additional amount of $52,843 and authorize the board chairperson to sign the same. We have Heidi present. Heidi, would you mind giving us a lowdown on exactly where these changes are taking place? You're muted, I believe.
Oops, sorry about that. Good morning, everybody. The total cost of this prime contract change order number 12 is $52,843. And this is all coming from our buyout savings at this point. So there's no additional add to the contract price because we do have this fund set up there for any extras that came out through the project. Some of these costs that came about, so during our buyout of the roofing contractor, we knew that the fluctuation of insulation, we couldn't lock in the exact pricing at the time until they actually shipped it. There was that fire back in, gosh, was it 2022 early, that kind of had the price or the materials kind of fluctuate a little bit with insulation. So we knew we would have some extra costs. We just didn't know exactly how much it would be. We had allocated about $20,000 for this, and it ended up being only $3,410. So that's part of that ad there. The other costs we have is the primary pole for consumers. We found out working with consumers that set that primary pole that they do not do the crossbars or the insulators, which was kind of interesting to us. We anticipated they would do all that work. So we had to have our electrician get a contractor to do that extra work. And that cost ended up being $10,534. Now that primary pole is expected to be on site December 12th. And after that, that's when that the crossbars and insulators would be work would be done. The next item, so to kind of save some cost, we worked with Paula Jail, our detention contractor, and Master Electric, and we added another relay panel for lighting control. With that add, we separated the detention area into 2 zones. And with those 2 zones, we were able to save costs with electrician, less labor and less materials because they didn't have to take the runs all the way back to one corner of the pod area is what I'm calling it. So that actually saved us $5,581. The next item we have on here was CCD. Was it CCD 17? The lift station that we needed for the project. There was no electrical identified on the drawings when we went to go wire that. So that adding the breaker and the disconnect switch and everything associated with that was looks like it was what am I saying? Oh, and then we had Chase that was part of that CCD 17 as well. That chase that was identified originally wasn't large enough to bring all the conduits in from the project to take it up to the master control room, IT closet, which was up on the 2nd floor. So we have a masonry wall there and also a drywall wall up on the 2nd floor into that room. So that total ad run was $32,508. Moving down. Oh, that I'm sorry. That also included the bulkhead in the classroom. CCD 17 was large. That we had the ductwork in that classroom in order to kind of finish that whole area, and so we didn't have any inmates or anything hitting on that. We added a bulkhead in that area. Then going down, the last item on PCO 66, which during construction, our metal panel contractor, FOCO, brought to our attention that where we had the seam for the metal panels and the window, was kind of an issue they brought up, just because the fact is that it was a good place for water to get into the building. And so we shifted the masonry, or I'm sorry, the metal panels, and we moved the masonry out a little bit more. And then we had to rework the glass. And so that added a change of, what was the total there? I can't find it. Oh, $400. So that was just because we had already bought the glass. And then the last item was the detention ponds. We had farm tile from existing. We were advised to cut the tile and have them drain into the detention ponds. Once we did that, we did have soil erosion. And so we are adding some riprap around there, so that way we don't have any problems in the future with erosion at those areas when those tile are coming into those detention ponds. And that was a cost of $11,572. That gives us the total of $52,843. Is there any questions?
Any questions?
No.
No. Your reasoning behind all the changes makes sense.
Okay.
Mr. Embry, would you like to make the motion to move this forward?
Move to consider approving the prime contract change order number 12 with Clark Construction, and that additional amount of $52,843 to our work session next Tuesday night.
I will support that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign. It moves forward. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
You have a good weather day.
Mhm.
Yes, we do have a good weather day. Now we're just hopefully that the wind doesn't carry, so we have no problems with them setting the steel out near AC. So,
Thank
yes,
you.
sunshine is nice.
Next item is a discussion regarding Isabella County Sheriff's Office and Correctional Facility Project funding. I don't know if we're gonna have a whole lot of discussion. I mean, we're another change order, so our buyout is getting down. But again, it's just a matter of, we need to keep in our front of our mind that we're probably gonna have costs that are gonna be over this amount, and so we don't get caught by surprise, but the amount of dollars that we actually set up in contingency was rather low compared to probably the amount of dollars we should have put in there, but. You
I just have a couple of things. I did attend the contractors meeting today. I want to let you know that we're 81% on schedule, which is a good thing.
We caught up a little bit on
A
that.
little bit, yeah, week to week, a little bit, even with some of the bad weather we've had. And a lot of good communication today between the contractors. They were all present. Great. A lot of great communication between them and between Integrated Architecture and our engineering firm. Seemed to be real good communication, so I didn't say Heidi's gone, but I want to say thank you to
She's
her.
still on there. She can.
Thank you, Heidi.
Oh, you're welcome. I didn't know if there was anything I needed to say after the discussion you started, and so that's why I just kind of hung back in the background, so.
I have nothing else.
All right, this doesn't require, we'll probably have, are we gonna have this on the agenda as a,
I believe that was the intent.
okay,
Yes,
as we go forward, just a major item that we need to keep up on.
exactly.
Next
See what the
item.
next one.
Discussion regarding the Isabella County Administration Building asbestos removal, cleaning and rebuilding expenses. So we did get in our emails 4 proposals for remediation of the asbestos. And Madam Administrator, you probably want to weigh in with some of your thoughts on.
Yeah, and obviously we'll get into it in the special meeting, but kind of similar to 2 weeks ago when we sat here, I've been uneasy about the speed at which we're going in this direction to so quickly let an RFP and review bids and enter a contract with an abatement contractor when we don't know so much about the story going forward. We hope that the apparent successful bidder from that RFP will be at the noon meeting today to answer some questions. It's my understanding that Northern Analytical, who did the original air quality testing for us, wrote the spec for the RFP, will not be in attendance at the noon meeting today. So we're hoping to hear at least from the abatement contractor to answer some of those questions we have. But the abatement is, I feel like, this much of it, and we really need to understand what is happening to that building as far as what's gonna be removed and what needs to be rebuilt.
Full scope.
Yes, the full scope. That's not in my training. That's not in Steve Shoemaker's training to come up with the full scope. I know that Facilities Director Shoemaker has met with Brian Kench at the city. We wanted to understand if we do X percentage of rehabilitation, remodel, then we have to bring everything up to code. We thought it was 20%, we've learned it's 50. That's even more important to find someone who can put, I think, a fine line on what is 50% of the building. Does this interact? Is this interjecting? Does this trigger? Everything's up to code. And what do we have to replace? The asbestos is in fire protection throughout the building. Do we have to replace fire protection or do we have to replace fire suppression? Very, very, very different things, very different cost-wise as well. My fear is the cost of rebuilding will then force us to consider the fate of that building. Return, not return. If we're not returning, do we abate? Can someone else abate? I think we need to know the amount of that rebuilding first. Before we can say, yes, let's choose a contractor and abate even. What I'm hearing is you need an architect to help you through that. You need an architect to help with what is it gonna take to rebuild? What is that physically? What is it gonna take? And then how does that happen? They need to develop the plan to rebuild. That's not within our scope. So I'll be talking to the board at the noon meeting about the need to engage with an architect. We need to look at funding sources. Yes, the state of Michigan will have some funding in this regard, perhaps. We have some ARPA dollars left that we're working really hard to make available for this purpose, to the tune of a couple $1 million. But do you go to the state or the feds with a request when you don't know what your total project is? We know what abatement might cost us, but what about the rebuilding? So I think we need to know that when we have that ask. So I'm starting to feel like the next step is to get an architect. I did reach out. I was feeling so uneasy. I reached out to another consultant to get a second opinion, if you will. I'll be talking again to the board about that at noon today. We reached out to one of our vendors, consultants that we work with quite often, Director Newport, reached out to Spicer Group for me early on to find out if they had any expertise in asbestos, because they're a known and trusted vendor with us, right, for decades. And they don't have that expertise, but suggested a company that did. I reached out to that company and am planning to meet with them hopefully by the end of this week. They do believe we're right to take a pause. They would like to look at the spec that was released. They'd like to look at the air quality reports and the bids that were received. That's all public information. I have no problem sharing that with them. So I think out of the gate, I told you I reached out to OSHA to say, we're being told this, do we go this? And there was no reason not to continue in that direction. And it's not to say the bids we let out aren't valid. The RFP we let, it's valid, but just a second set of eyes to make sure we're going down the right path. This is
Potentially,
very large.
yes. I like your idea, being prudent. Nothing, right now, we're getting it set up to where we can hopefully have our county government set up for at least possibly 2 years, if that's what it needs. So we're in no rush. We have adequate amount of time, I feel, to go through everything in a very prudent, thoughtful, and thorough way so that we are spending taxpayer dollars wisely. I really do not want to get into a lot of knee-jerk reactions, because once you start down a road with one knee-jerk reaction, then it becomes one after another that can become very expensive. So I appreciate the.
It's not the legacy
Thoughtful.
we want with the
No.
taxpayers. Prudence.
Yes.
With the thought of delaying to get a second look at the data and how the specs were, or the RFP was written, do we have a timeline that these will become null and void? Is it a 30-day, 60-day?
I think I want to say they were held for 90 days. They are all kept to a deadline in the RFP of March 15th, 2024 to have the abatement activities finalized. That was a requirement in the RFP. So they're kind of all working on that. So we do have a little time to pause and be prudent, but I think we can't pause for months, because then they're not going to be able to meet that March 15th deadline for abatement.
That deadline assumed a starting point of when, you know?
I do
Or did it
not
not
know
specify?
specifically.
Okay.
You just want, we had a
Okay.
deadline.
Yeah.
So if we needed to extend that
Oh,
completion time, we could.
yes.
If necessary.
Especially, yes, we absolutely could.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm not opposed to a pause, as long as it doesn't go out too long. These figures are now gonna be they're public information,
Mhm.
so all the contractors will have them, and if we go out again on bid,
Right, yeah.
I'm not sure that's gonna be to our favor.
No, I agree.
If the board would want to, if you're comfortable enough with choosing a bidder from the RFP, you could do it contingent on things too, right? Contingent on a favorable estimate for rebuilding. You could.
Yeah.
You could quantify that or not.
I guess I'm trying to imagine what other road do we have to go down other than abate and then rebuild?
Well, I think the other road that is considered is, does the rebuilding become more than the building is worth? And at that point, you're demolishing the building essentially and selling the property or rebuilding on the property.
Which would cost money to demolish the building.
Mhm.
And to do that, you're gonna have to abate, because that's a requirement. So,
So we've got to do the abatement.
yeah, that's not a question.
And
The abatement has to move forward regardless of how we're going to,
And then we have a building that's been abated. We need to put back together
Or sell it as is,
or sell as is.
or not abate and sell as is.
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm kind of skeptical that we could find another building at a reasonable cost. And abandon that one. And I guess if we're gonna pause, I don't see the sense in a long pause.
Mhm.
Me either.
It needs to be a very quick one.
Yeah.
The longer we pause, the more money it's gonna cost us.
True.
So finding an architect is a pause, right? Writing an RFP for an architect or making phone calls, right? So our purchasing policy allows us to choose professional services without an RFP or an RFP. So we could, and one architect that we've worked with a lot recently is Integrated Architecture. We've had some ups and downs with them, but we've seen them turn around and be responsive on the correctional facility project.
True.
Integrated Architecture performed the feasibility study on the county administration building back in 2016-ish, and would maybe have some information or a leg up maybe that others wouldn't have.
History with
That's
the building.
most recent pertinent information. So if we do engage with an architect, I think that might be Swift if they have the time to do it. That would be the limiting factor maybe for them.
and we're not gonna know the full scope of rebuilding until abatement, I mean, we need to talk to whoever's gonna do the abatement. We're talking removing one half of all interior walls, but you're gonna be wetting the ceiling. If it's drywall, it's gonna come down on the other half. Are you gonna destroy that in the process of the abatement where we have both walls? I mean, that's the only, I don't know if you can protect it from wet.
Yeah, I didn't see anything in the proposals that suggested that the other side of the wall will get ruined. And I would think that would be part of the proposal if that was the case. I might be wrong. And also, I reviewed all 4 proposals pretty carefully. I think we've got one that's written really, really well. And they just happen to be the low bidder as well, which is a plus. But they have a plan where they can cut a little hole where the baseboard goes and cut a little hole above the ceiling grid and fish a camera down through there and see what that cavity looks like. And if it's free of any asbestos, then they don't tear that wall down. And they even went through the prints and identified which walls would need that, because some of the walls are capped off on top. So it couldn't be anything
They're
down in there.
encapsulated.
Yep.
Mhm.
Some are not. So they had identified which walls were capped off at the top and which ones were not. And those walls, they said they could fish a camera down through each cavity and get a look at it.
Okay.
And see, and then they had a deduct for not tearing that wall apart.
Oh, so it's in there. If they don't need to, then it comes off.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
I like the sound of that. I
Yep.
didn't catch that part.
They also talked about, and I don't remember exactly how they worded it, but when they removed the ceiling, they talked about preserving some of the ceiling grid. So if you preserve the perimeter, then you don't have to go through and
Re-level.
re-level all the perimeter and remount that perimeter. That's the main part
That's a
about
big
doing these
expense.
drop ceilings,
Hmm.
is that perimeter. Well, so they talked about
Preserving.
protecting that and just tearing the rest of it out, which the other contractors did not.
They said take it all. Okay.
So,
And I hope a representative from that company will be at the meeting.
That would be advantageous. Yes.
I hope.
yeah,
Can answer your question.
I think too that we could walk that building and kind of, we know some of the stuff that will have to be rebuilt. We know we're gonna have to put new carpet in.
Mhm.
We could do a kind of a survey of window coverings. Some of the windows had those old metal blinds that last forever.
Those should be fine.
There's
Just
no
clean them
sense
and
throwing
go.
those away,
Mhm.
yeah. No, they don't. Well, that's, okay.
They're down.
All right, well, that's one of the things that will, maybe we do pitch them, they don't work.
If we can save them, we'll save them.
But that's, I mean, we're not architects, but we know enough to look at window treatments and carpet and that kind of stuff and get a base idea of what we're after. Okay. We know we're gonna have to put the ductwork back in. I don't know what that entails. We know we're gonna want to paint as long as everything, all the rooms are empty.
Probably need to rewire to meet the needs of current technology.
Need to rewire, and then I think, I don't know if we'll meet that 50% threshold of having to bring everything up to code, but we might want to think about fire suppression, whether we meet that or not.
Just make that a one-off that we take care of. Okay.
And we've heard from departments about having the need for fireproof document storage in the
Yeah.
past. And
Okay.
I guess in all this, the one thing that, and I didn't realize I was so quotable with the article that came out in the newspaper.
That's why everybody's watching you.
Walked into a township meeting last night and wondered if I had red eyes, but I do worry about these things. And one of the things I kind of thought is we have to make sure we have a financial plan, even though there are so many moving things. We don't want to get hit all of a sudden with bills that we can't pay because we have to take care of the jail correctional facility project. We know we may have a cash flow problem coming up, next spring. All these things, we have to start being proactive and looking at what do we need to do to start coming up with some financing or some options. And you're looking at some of them, but I don't know if that's gonna be sufficient to keep us from being caught by surprise and in a real desperate situation. That's what really bugs me. I don't have an answer. I don't think anybody in this room has an answer right now. Except maybe the treasurer.
Mhm.
He's always
Treasurer had an answer 3 years ago, and he's telling you this.
Mhm.
Everybody turned their cheeks on the other way.
Mhm.
okay.
And now we are, so.
Any other comments on this discussion item?
Looking forward to our noon meeting. Get this thing rolling, because this will be the catalyst where we go from here.
Yeah,
How long it's gonna take and what we're gonna need to do.
and where's your comfort level for getting that information, right? Because I do believe Chairman Hope saying, you know, we can walk that building and we can get a
Should.
good idea of quantifying what needs to go back in. I just don't know how to price that. And, you know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
are we
Yeah.
confident in that, or do we need to? get
Oh, I don't
an
think we know how to
architect
price
to
that,
hold
but
up
I
and-
think we can,
Yes or no on what needs to
at
be
least
done.
we'll know some of
Mhm.
what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And some of the things like carpet, sometimes you have to get that ordered. They don't keep a bunch of it on stock anymore.
To do
So
that.
to keep things
Mhm.
from holding us up when we go to put stuff back together.
Mhm.
If we have bids for everything we need to do and we have the materials ordered, so that can all take place.
And you're very right. We've had carpet on order for state police posts for at least 5 or 6 weeks now.
Yeah, they don't keep a big stock of carpet anymore. They order it.
And that's gonna take a lot of carpet.
Mhm. Well, I just had one other comment. I do like the fact that, Treasurer Pickens has made it clear that, we had some opportunity 3 years ago, but since then, you come on board. NEDOC, and really started working towards looking to the future and trying to avoid, as many pitfalls as we can, right? We see one coming. We're trying to address that now. I think both of these gentlemen are on board with the idea of getting out ahead of this situation as best we can to try to minimize the cost and avoid any surprises. I think because of what you guys, Madam Administrator and interim administrator have done by setting up that long-term budget setup, I think it helps us a lot, really get an idea of where we are right now. And while I am concerned, I'm not as concerned about surprises, because we got a good idea where we are. We know what we have. We know we've got, what obligations we have to meet, short-term and long-term. And this is just a little one-off, whereas before, if we didn't know where we were going to be in 2 or 3 years, if we didn't listen to Treasurer Pickens and we just buried our heads in the sand, I believe that just this one item could really cause a huge ripple effect if we didn't have our ducks in order. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have the knowledge of where we're going to be in 2, 3, 5, 10 years. So again, for me, I feel pretty confident in one, where we are, the knowledge that we have about where we are, who we have in place to get it done. I feel like we can get this done and make it work and keep everybody back, get everybody back in business very quickly. Even though we are planning on being prudent and slowing our roll a little bit, I really feel like we're going to do it in the right way in the best interest of our taxpayer.
And I'm confident we can come up with a roadmap to get us to the future. What I don't have the confidence is where we are financially. You know, that this removal and cleaning and rebuilding the building, we don't know what that's gonna cost. Architect will get us there. Whether it's gonna be a total of $5 million or $12 million. You know, I guess I'd like to see maybe our 10-year forecast come up with some figure that will let us know
Incorporate
the
that
reality
into
of the situation.
Mhm.
Even if we just use at this point a $5 million figure, because we're talking all of those costs, we're talking temporary housing. We're talking about moving stuff around, in and out, and
Mhm. But,
talking cash flow.
right,
Use the tool.
I think having that might bring a little more reality to this whole financial picture.
True.
I think as we move forward, we're gonna probably have to find ways of reducing the budget or coming up with new money that we can
Right. Either grow the
borrow
top line
and be able to pay off again.
Mhm.
But I'm just wondering, usually it's during times of adversity, as opportunities to look to see where we might find some savings. And I know I've brought up having a hiring freeze. And the board has not wanted to go in that direction, but leaving it with the administration to determine that. But maybe, in the meetings that we have with elected officials and our department heads, especially the general fund dependent, that we encourage them to take a look at their operations to see if there's any chance to restructure internally.
increase efficiencies with who you have. Or Deborah, Medak, you think that's something that's doable? Be able to show us that? Okay, appreciate that, ma'am.
And I want to reiterate, this is not a pause on relocation.
Mhm.
Those efforts are still very much underway. We're making some ground on negotiating a lease with a property, just working it out with the attorneys on the legal ease. So we're getting much closer, not suggesting a pause on the relocation where offices are temporarily relocated is not a long-term solution.
So before moving on, I know Karen always has something to interject. I want to make sure I look at Karen and say, do you have anything to add to our discussion this morning on this topic? You always have good comments. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
You want to come on up here?
The only thing I would say is that before we go back, if that's where we're going, that we look at the space that we have. Because I know we had talked at budget meetings that our space in our office doesn't work for us, and it was never planned to be for us. It was done for with what was left of the money when they built the court building. And obviously, the way we do business is not like we did business back in 2000 when they put that together. We don't have the individuals, the title companies aren't in the office all the time. Our space is kind of disjointed. We have the books way in the one end. Nobody can see what anybody's doing when they're in the book room. We have the counter way at the other end. My office, I can consider the people in my office or in the book room. The way that the space is laid out is just kind of disjointed, and we don't need that much space anymore. And so moving forward, I think we all need to look at our space, and if that space can be used for someone else in a better way. We have people that need space. I know Michelle needs space, and it'd be awesome if we could get her out of the basement. If we can just kind of look at all of our spaces and put people where it makes more sense. Use the space wisely. That's all I'd say.
Sounds like something maybe we should get department heads together and look at the floor plans and
Get their recommendations.
see what.
Okay, we don't need to move this on. It'll be automatically on the agenda for just a discussion again. We'll move on then to the invoice list discussion. I'll look through them. I really didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I do see a lot of things, scanners, printers for building closure. Is that equipment that was going to be purchased anyhow, or is it additional equipment?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, a lot of it, Michelle was really cognizant. She always knows what's in her budget. So a lot of that was already budgeted for, but she went ahead and ordered, whatever was needed to get
Everybody
offices up
whole
and
again.
running. Yes. So a little bit of both, sorry.
Questions on any of the bills exceeding $5,000 or any of the background bills?
I did not have any. Nope. Sure.
All right, then
Pretty straight up.
we'll, this will be on our agenda next week.
Mhm.
Announcements, are there any announcements?
No, sir.
We'll do a call to the public.
Where?
Were you here for the public comments? or-
Having no public comment, we'll adjourn the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee.
Very good.
Like, am I late?
Was it 11?